It was a Tuesday morning, precisely 6:03 a.m., when she walked through the front door. 11 days of agonizing silence shattered by the soft click of the lock. My sister, Sarah, stood there. Unharmed. Unscathed. Wearing the exact same faded jeans and olive green hoodie she'd vanished in. But as our parents rushed forward, tears streaming, a chilling certainty began to settle in my gut: the person who returned was not my sister. November 14th. The day it all began. The air was already thick with the biting chill of winter, the sky a perpetual, bruised gray. Sarah, 23, had left for her evening shift at the small-town diner, a familiar routine. She never arrived. By midnight, panic had set in. Her car was still in the driveway. Her phone, charging on her bedside table. The first 24 hours were a blur of frantic phone calls, the police station's sterile waiting room, and the dawning horror that she was truly gone. We plastered her face on every lamppost, every storefront window in a 30-mile radius. Her smile, frozen in time, staring out from hastily printed flyers. The days bled into one another, each colder, darker than the last. The police offered grim statistics. Our hope dwindled with every passing hour. The house became a tomb of whispered anxieties and unspoken fears. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren, sent a jolt of false hope through us. My mother barely ate, her eyes hollow, fixed on the front door. My father paced, a silent sentinel against the encroaching dread. I remember the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves from the volunteer search parties, the sound of our own footsteps echoing in the silent woods. 11 days. 11 nights of imagining the worst. Of picturing Sarah lost, hurt, or worse, at the mercy of some unseen predator. The media had picked up the story, painting her as the missing waitress from Willow Creek. A faceless victim in a growing file. Then, on the 12th day, November 26th, she simply reappeared. As if she'd just stepped out for a morning stroll. The digital clock on the kitchen microwave read 6:03 a.m. The pale, pre-dawn light barely piercing the windows. She stood in the doorway, her breath misting slightly in the cold air that rushed in with her. Her expression, utterly blank. There were no signs of struggle. No dirt on her clothes, no leaves in her hair. Her worn sneakers were spotless. She looked tired, perhaps. But otherwise, perfectly pristine. It was unnerving, almost as if she'd been kept in a vacuum. My mother's cry of relief was a sound I will never forget, a raw, primal burst of joy and agony. But Sarah's response was muted. A small, almost hesitant smile. Her eyes, usually so bright, seemed distant, unfocused. When asked where she'd been, her voice was soft, even-toned. "I don't remember," she said, a slight frown creasing her brow. "Anything at all?" my father pressed, his voice thick with emotion. "How did you get home?" She shook her head slowly. "Nothing. It's blank. One moment I was leaving for work, the next, I was here. The doctors at the regional hospital found nothing. No injuries, no signs of assault, no drugs in her system. Every test came back clear. They diagnosed it as dissociative fugue. A rare psychological event where a person wanders, often for days or weeks, without awareness of their identity or surroundings. They explained it was a coping mechanism, a complete mental detachment from overwhelming stress or trauma. It sounded plausible. It sounded like an answer. We clung to that diagnosis. We wanted so desperately to believe it. It was better than the terrifying unknown. We were just relieved. Relieved she was back, safe, seemingly healthy. We were too exhausted to question the eerie perfection of her return. For the first few weeks, we attributed the subtle changes to the trauma. The blank stares, the quiet demeanor, the slight hesitation before answering. But as the days stretched into months, a pattern emerged, a growing collection of unsettling anomalies. One afternoon, I watched her pick up an old birthday card I'd given her. Her own distinctive, looping handwriting filled the page. She held it up, tilting her head, a curious, almost academic expression on her face. "Whose is this?" she asked, her voice soft. I laughed, a nervous, disbelieving sound. "It's yours, Sarah. You wrote it." She simply shrugged, a small, puzzled gesture. "It doesn't look like mine." Then there were the photographs. Old family albums, filled with faded snapshots of our childhood. She would pore over them, her gaze lingering on images of herself. It wasn't nostalgia. It was examination. She'd trace her own face with a detached finger, a faint, almost imperceptible tilt of her head, as if studying a stranger. The most painful change, for my mother, was the name. Sarah had always called her Mom. After she returned, it slowly, imperceptibly, shifted. First, it was less frequent. Then, it stopped altogether. Now, she calls her Susan. Always Susan. My mother tries to hide her hurt, but I see it in her eyes. Our childhood dog, Buster, a scruffy terrier mix she'd raised from a puppy, had passed away years ago. Sarah had wept inconsolably for days, burying him under the old oak tree in the backyard, visiting his grave every week. One evening, my father mentioned him. "Remember Buster, Sarah? He always loved your scratched behind the ears." She looked up, a pleasant, empty smile on her face. Buster? Was he a neighbor's dog? The air in the room thickened, suddenly heavy. We exchanged glances, a silent question passing between us. Each incident, small on its own, was a tiny crack in the foundation of who we thought she was. A quiet erosion of her identity. I tried to rationalize it. Trauma. Amnesia. The doctors said it was possible. But the feeling of unease grew, a persistent hum beneath the surface. She was pleasant, cooperative, even affectionate in her own quiet way. But there was a hollowness, a missing spark. Her laugh, once boisterous and free, was now a soft, almost polite titter. Her favorite songs, she'd hum along to, but the words were often wrong. 2 years passed. 2 years of living with this new Sarah, this polite, placid stranger who wore my sister's face. I decided to test her. To find a memory so specific, so deeply personal, that only the real Sarah could recall it. I chose our camping trip. A pivotal moment, just the two of us, when we were 16. Our shared secret adventure. "Remember that summer, Sarah?" I began, trying to keep my voice casual. "The one where we snuck out and went camping by Miller's Creek." A flicker of recognition, or so I hoped, crossed her face. "Oh, yes," she said, her eyes brightening slightly. "The old tent with the broken zipper." My heart leaped. This was it. This was my sister. "And the fire," I prompted, a hopeful tremor in my voice. "Remember how we almost set the whole forest ablaze trying to roast marshmallows?" She chuckled, a genuine, almost familiar sound. "And the stars. So many stars, brighter than I'd ever seen them. We stayed up all night just watching." She described the biting cold of the morning, the smell of pine needles, the way the mist hung over the creek. Every detail was perfect. The broken tent zipper, the near-disastrous campfire, the endless, star-strewn sky. Even the specific brand of instant coffee we'd packed, which we both hated, but drank anyway, shivering in the dawn. My relief was immense, overwhelming. I felt a surge of guilt for ever doubting her. She was here. She was Sarah. But then, a cold, hard fact slammed into me, a memory that had been buried deep beneath layers of hope and denial. A memory that belonged to me, and only me. Sarah hadn't been on that camping trip. She couldn't have been. That summer, she had broken her leg. A clumsy fall from her bicycle, resulting in a cast from ankle to thigh. She had spent the entire summer confined to the house, miserable and bored. I had gone camping with my best friend, Emily, instead. Every detail she had just recounted, every vivid memory, was correct. But they weren't hers. She was describing my memory. Emily's and mine. A trip she had never, ever taken. The air left my lungs. The room spun. The pleasant, smiling woman across from me was a stranger. She possessed fragments of our shared past, yes. But they were like borrowed clothes, worn by someone else. She had assimilated memories that were not her own. She had learned our history, perhaps from our conversations, our photo albums. But the Miller's Creek trip? That was never discussed. It was a silent, private memory, just for me. The implications were staggering, terrifying. She wasn't just Sarah with amnesia. She was someone else entirely. Who was this person? Where had she been for 11 days? And what, or who, had happened to my real sister? 2 years later, she still lives with us. She's healthy, happy, functional. A pleasant, quiet presence in our home. My parents, I think, have buried their doubts, too afraid to confront the unsettling truth. But I see it every day. In the way her eyes don't quite hold the old spark, in the way she smiles without true mirth. She may look like Sarah. She may sound like Sarah. She may even have some of Sarah's mannerisms. But she is not my sister. I don't know who came back through that door on that cold November morning. But it isn't her. And the thought chills me to my very core. Subscribe to Echoes in the Dark, new mysteries unsealed every week.